Today we are going to see about John Dryden's A Song for St Cecilia's Day, written in 1687. This is one of Dryden's most famous poems and one of the greatest odes in English literature. In this poem, Dryden celebrates the power of music. He shows how music can create the world, control human emotions, inspire love, courage, sorrow, and even bring the universe to an end. The poem is dedicated to St Cecilia, who is known as the patron saint of music. John Dryden was born on the 19th of August 1631 in Aldwinkle, Northamptonshire, England. He was born into a Puritan family, so from childhood he grew up in a strict and disciplined atmosphere. His family believed strongly in religion, education, and hard work. These early influences later helped Dryden become a serious and thoughtful writer. Dryden received his early education at Westminster School. There he studied under the famous teacher Dr. Richard Busby, who trained students very strictly. At Westminster, Dryden learned Latin, Greek, history, and classical literature. This is where he first developed his love for poetry and writing. After finishing school, Dryden joined Trinity College, Cambridge. At Cambridge he continued to study literature, philosophy, and the classics. The knowledge he gained there later became the foundation of his poems, plays, and critical essays. John Dryden holds a very important place in English literature. He is often called the father of English criticism, because he was the first English writer to explain clearly how literature should be written and judged. Dryden was not only a great poet, but also the greatest critic of the Restoration Age. Through his essays and critical writings, he taught people how to understand poetry, drama, and language. In 1668, Dryden was appointed Poet Laureate of England. This was the highest honor given to a poet by the king. In the same year, he also became Historiographer Royal, which meant he had to write about important historical events for the nation. Dryden became so famous and influential that the Restoration period is often called the Age of Dryden. This shows that he was the most important literary figure of his time. John Dryden wrote in many different forms: poetry, criticism, and drama, and in each field he became highly successful. Among his most important poems is Absalom and Achitophel, a political satire in which Dryden attacks the enemies of the king. Another famous poem is Flecknoe, where he humorously mocks a bad poet named Thomas Shadwell. Annus Mirabilis celebrates England's strength during difficult times such as war and the Great Fire of London. Dryden also wrote poems about the power of music. Alexander's Feast and A Song for St Cecilia's Day are his two great musical odes. In both poems, he shows how music can control human emotions. As a critic, Dryden is most famous for an essay of dramatic poesy. In this work, he discusses what makes good drama and compares ancient and modern writers. His prefaces and dedications are also important because they contain his ideas about poetry, language, and criticism. Dryden was also a great dramatist. His best-known play is All for Love, based on the story of Antony and Cleopatra. Other famous plays include The Indian Emperor and Aurangzeb. John Dryden died on the 1st of May 1700. Because of his greatness, he was buried in Westminster Abbey, where many of England's greatest writers are honored. St Cecilia is known as the patron saint of music in Christian tradition. People believed that she had a very special connection with music and divine harmony. According to the old story, when St Cecilia was getting married, she did not listen only to the music played at the wedding. Instead, she heard heavenly music in her heart. Because of this miracle, she became closely connected with sacred music and spiritual beauty. In England, musicians and music lovers celebrated St Cecilia's Day every year on the 22nd of November. On this day, special musical programs and poems were presented in her honor. Many famous poets wrote poems about St Cecilia because she represented the beauty and power of music. John Dryden also joined this tradition. In 1687, he wrote A Song for St Cecilia's Day, to praise both St Cecilia and the power of music. Later, Dryden wrote another even more famous poem on the same subject called Alexander's Feast. In both poems, he shows that music is not just entertainment, it has the power to change human emotions and even influence the world. Now let us understand the poem itself. A Song for St Cecilia's Day is an ode. An ode is a serious and musical poem written to praise someone or something important. Here, Dryden praises St Cecilia and the power of music. The poem is not just about songs or instruments. It explains that music is one of the strongest forces in the world. According to Dryden, music can control nature, influence human feelings, and even affect the whole universe. Dryden presents music as a divine power. In the beginning of the poem, he says that the world itself was created through harmony. In other words, before the world existed, there was heavenly music, and from that music the universe was born. In the middle of the poem, Dryden shows how different musical instruments create different emotions in human beings. One instrument can create love, another can create sadness, and another can create courage and anger. Finally, at the end of the poem, Dryden says that just as music created the world, music will also destroy it on the last day. The poem was published in 1687. It is written in the form of an irregular Pindaric ode, which means the length, rhythm, and rhyme of the stanzas keep changing. Dryden uses this changing form to match the changing sounds and emotions of music. The central idea of the poem is very clear. Music has the power to create, control, and destroy. The poem is carefully divided into 7 stanzas, and each stanza focuses on a different kind of music or a different effect of music. In the first stanza, Dryden speaks about universal harmony. He says that the whole world was created through heavenly music and order. In the second stanza, he introduces the trumpet. The loud sound of the trumpet creates courage, energy, and the desire to fight in war. The third stanza is about the flute. Unlike the trumpet, the flute creates soft and sad emotions. It expresses love, sorrow, and helpless feelings. In the fourth stanza, Dryden speaks about the violin. The violin represents strong emotions such as passion, jealousy, pain, and emotional suffering. The fifth stanza is connected with the organ. The sound of the organ is holy and peaceful. It creates devotion and reminds people of God and religion. In the sixth stanza, Dryden compares 2 great musical figures, Jubal and St Cecilia. Jubal was believed to be the inventor of music, but Dryden says that St Cecilia's music is even greater because it is divine and heavenly. Finally, in the 7th stanza, Dryden speaks about the last trumpet. On the final day of the world, this trumpet will sound, and the same music that created the world will destroy it. So, the poem moves step by step, from the creation of the world, through human emotions, and finally to the end of the universe. In the first stanza, Dryden explains how the world was created. He begins with the famous line, "From harmony, from heavenly harmony, this universal frame began." By universal frame, he means the whole universe. Dryden says that before the world was created, everything was in complete confusion. There was no order, no shape, and no balance. The world was only chaos. Then heavenly music entered this chaos. Through that music, order was created and the universe slowly took its proper form. Dryden believes that music is not only something humans enjoy. For him, music is a divine power. It is the force through which God created the world. The tuneful voice in the poem represents this divine sound that brought everything into balance. He also says that even after creation, the universe continues to work like a great piece of music. The planets and stars move in perfect order, just like different notes in a song. Nothing moves randomly, everything follows a pattern and harmony. This idea comes partly from the Greek philosopher Pythagoras. Pythagoras believed in the music of the spheres. According to him, the planets move in such perfect order that they create a kind of silent heavenly music. Dryden combines this Greek idea with Christian belief. So, in the poem, both God and heavenly harmony are responsible for the creation of the world. The stanza is also very important because it shows the neoclassical ideas of Dryden's age. Neoclassical writers believed that the world is based on order, balance, reason, and harmony. Dryden presents music as the symbol of all these qualities. For competitive exams, remember one important point. In the first stanza, music is shown as a creative force. It creates the universe, removes chaos, and brings perfect order to the world. In the second stanza, Dryden moves from the creation of the universe to the effect of one particular musical instrument, the trumpet. He writes, "The trumpet's loud clangor excites us to arms." Here, the word clangor means a loud, sharp, metallic sound. The sound of the trumpet is not soft or peaceful. It is strong, powerful, and full of energy. According to Dryden, as soon as soldiers hear the trumpet, they immediately become ready for battle. The music of the trumpet fills them with courage and excitement. It removes fear from their hearts and makes them eager to fight. The trumpet awakens many emotions at the same time. It creates bravery, heroism, anger, patriotism, and a martial spirit. The soldiers feel proud of their country and become willing to sacrifice their lives in war. Dryden wants us to understand that music has the power to change human emotions. A single sound can completely transform the mind of a person. Before hearing the trumpet, a soldier may feel weak or afraid. But after hearing it, he becomes bold and fearless. The image in this stanza is very clear and dramatic. We can imagine soldiers standing quietly before a battle. Then suddenly the trumpet is heard. Immediately, the soldiers lift their weapons, become excited, and rush towards war. This stanza is important because Dryden shows that every musical instrument produces a different emotion. The trumpet produces strength and courage, while other instruments later create sadness, love, or devotion. This idea comes from the old classical theory called music and passions. According to this theory, different kinds of music affect different feelings in the human mind. Dryden uses the trumpet as the best example of music that creates warlike emotions and heroic action. In the third stanza, Dryden changes the mood completely. After the loud and powerful sound of the trumpet, he now introduces the flute. He writes, "The soft complaining flute, in dying notes, discovers the woes of hopeless lovers." The flute does not create courage or war. Instead, it creates sadness, tenderness, and emotional pain. The word, complaining, is very important. Dryden describes the flute as if it were a human being who is crying or expressing sorrow. The sound of the flute is soft, gentle, and full of feeling. It seems to speak for lovers who are unhappy or heartbroken. The phrase, dying notes, means that the sound of the flute becomes slowly weaker and softer. The music fades away gently, just like the hopes of a sad lover. These fading notes make the feeling of sorrow even stronger. According to Dryden, the flute expresses the pain of hopeless lovers. These are lovers whose love is not returned, or who are separated from the person they love. The flute gives voice to their suffering, longing, loneliness, and complaint. This instrument creates very different emotions from the trumpet. The trumpet produces courage, excitement, and action. The flute produces tenderness, sadness, and emotional weakness. Dryden places these two instruments side by side to show that different kinds of music create completely different feelings. The flute therefore becomes a symbol of romantic sorrow. It represents love that cannot be fulfilled, tears that cannot be stopped, and the quiet suffering of the human heart. For competitive exams, remember that Dryden uses strong contrast in this part of the poem. The loud, warlike trumpet is followed by the soft, sorrowful flute. This contrast helps Dryden prove his main idea that music has many powers and affects every human emotion in a different way. In the fourth stanza, Dryden introduces the violin. The emotions created by the violin are much stronger and more violent than the emotions created by the flute. He writes, "Sharp violins proclaim the jealous pangs and desperation, fury, frantic indignation, depth of pains and height of passion." These lines show that the violin does not speak about quiet sadness. Instead, it expresses extreme feelings that are almost impossible to control. The word, sharp, suggests that the sound of the violin is powerful and piercing. It enters deeply into the heart. The violin becomes the voice of people who are suffering from jealousy, anger, passionate love, and emotional pain. Dryden says that the violin expresses jealous pangs. This means the painful feeling that comes when a person fears losing the one he or she loves. The word desperation shows that the feeling is so strong that the person becomes hopeless and restless. The violin also creates fury and frantic indignation. Fury means violent anger, while frantic indignation means wild and uncontrollable rage. These words make the emotion seem almost dangerous. The music of the violin is not calm. It is intense, burning, and full of emotional struggle. Dryden ends the stanza with the phrase, depth of pains and height of passion. This means that the violin can express both the deepest suffering and the strongest love. No other instrument in the poem expresses emotion with such power. This stanza is important because Dryden again compares different kinds of music. The flute in the previous stanza was soft, gentle, and sorrowful. The violin is completely different. It is fierce, emotional, and violent. The flute represents quiet sadness, but the violin represents emotional explosion. Dryden also uses many strong words in this stanza, such as fury, frantic, and desperation. These powerful words help the reader feel the emotional force of the violin. Through them, Dryden proves once again that music can control even the strongest human feelings. In the fifth stanza, Dryden turns from human emotions to religion and spiritual experience. Here he introduces the organ, which he considers the greatest and most sacred of all musical instruments. He says, "But oh, what art can teach, what human voice can reach, the sacred organ's praise." Through these lines, Dryden tells us that the beauty of the organ is so great that no human words are enough to describe it. No poet, singer, or artist can fully explain its power. Unlike the trumpet, the flute, or the violin, the organ does not create war, sorrow, or passion. Its music creates devotion, peace, and spiritual joy. When people hear the organ, they forget ordinary life and begin to think about God and heaven. The organ was mainly used in churches, so its sound was closely connected with prayer and worship. Dryden believes that the music of the organ lifts the human soul upward. It takes the mind away from worldly troubles and brings it closer to heaven. The phrase, sacred organ, is very important. Dryden does not call it simply an organ. He calls it sacred because it represents divine music. The organ becomes a bridge between human beings and God. This instrument creates feelings of devotion, religious peace, and divine ecstasy. Divine ecstasy means a state of deep spiritual happiness in which a person feels completely united with God. The organ is also different from the earlier instruments in another way. The trumpet, flute, and violin affect personal emotions like courage, sorrow, and jealousy. But the organ affects the soul itself. Its power is higher and more spiritual. There is also an important historical point here. In Restoration England, the church organ was a symbol of both religion and royal authority. After the return of the king, church music became important again. Dryden admired the organ because it joined beauty, art, religion, and power in one instrument. For Dryden, the organ is the closest thing to heavenly music on earth. That is why he says no human voice can truly praise it enough.